everyone. I'm Denise Garlick. I'm the state representative for Medfield and also for Needham and Cordova. In Medfield, I represent precincts 1 and 2 on paper. In my heart, I represent all of Medfield. I hope you know that. I want to start first by introducing my husband, Russell Garlick, is here with me tonight. And I wanted to set the table a little bit for how we're going to start the evening. We will talk about logistics in a moment, but the general idea of the representative's report, and I believe this is my 11th report to you, is that you have sent me to do a job. It is a tremendous opportunity, and I am deeply grateful for it. I wanted to take a few moments to tell you how I am fulfilling that position and responsibilities that you've given me, and then I want to talk about budget and legislation, how it impacts Medfield and how it impacts that one. So with that, I do want to take one moment of personal privilege. We are here tonight with the good Paul Hinkley. Paul Hinkley worked for the Medfield Housing Authority for 29 years. He works for them now as a commissioner on the Housing Authority. He has worked for the town in a many variety of ways, and always with a positive spirit, and always with true friendship for so many people in this town, and true friendship for me. We actually had a proclamation for Paul that I wanted to have framed, and because I wanted to do it perfectly, I was very delayed in doing it at all. And I want to take this moment and give this to Paul. And Paul, thank you for all your service and for your friendship.
And thank you for your service.
Okay, and at this time, I'd like to turn to Colin Feeder, who is my chief of staff. And I just want to say, as we begin this discussion, and I turn to Colin first, I want you to know that he is certainly my very right-hand person. He is a trusted advisor to me, as well as being an incredible leader of the team of staff. And to the people who are here, so many good friends who are here, you might remember in the very beginning, a representative has one person on staff. And then as you grow in the State House and you take on more responsibilities, you get more staff. And but Colin, if you could take us through the logistics of this evening.
Sure. So we're doing this a couple different ways in this new era of hybrid meetings. So we have people who are here in person, we have people who are joining us on Zoom, and people who are watching on Medfield TV. So per usual, we'll have time at the end for questions, and we'll alternate between people who are here who want to ask a question and people who are joining us on Zoom. So if you have a question and you're on Zoom, you can type it into the chat and we'll get there at the end. And if you're watching on Medfield TV, you can call the phone number that's listed on the screen. It'll ring, you leave a voicemail, and we will ask that question on their behalf if they're unable to join in. So we're trying to make it as inclusive and easy to participate as possible.
And we have next for you a picture of the staff. I'm going to ask each of the staff to stand and introduce themselves with their position, and then we will return to those staff members during the presentation.
So here, I'm Colin Fedor. I'm Representative Garlick's Chief of Staff.
Hi, I'm Elena Christopoulos. I'm the Research Director for Chair Garlick in the House Committee on Bills and Third Reading.
I'm Maureen Callahan. I serve as District Legislative Aide.
Hannah Lee, Legislative Aide, and I cover Medfield. I'm Cynthia Leccia, and I'm reference Administrative Aide.
My name is Olivia Nassa. I'm the Barbara Lee Fellow for this week.
And this is just a graphic of our district and the number of people. And you'll see that Medfield's population, even in precincts 1 and 2, has increased, as has Dover's and Needham. So I now represent 43,000 people, a little bit more than that. This is a slide of the positions.
Use the podium like these.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is this better, Andrew? All right, thank you. So this slide shows the positions that I currently hold, as well as for people who I am just meeting for the first time, my previous positions in the House. The previous positions, for many people who know me, know that I'm a registered nurse in the House of Representatives. I have served on all of our healthcare committees. I have also been the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Education, and I have served as the vice chair of Ways and Means. So this very varied experience of policy and budget together. Presently, I am the chair of the House Committee on Bills and Third Reading. This tends to be a mystery to people. I did have a constituent say to me, Denise, how many times do you have to read those bills? Eleanor is going to take us through that in a few minutes and about what that committee actually is and why I want that. I am also the elected chair on a permanent commission on the status of individuals with disabilities. This is an issue that rings very true to the hearts of many, many people in Medfield. This commission was set up in the law enforcement bill, but it was because the bill was moving, and it was a vehicle to do this commission that was very important to my colleagues and I. And in that position, we are actually an independent state agency and have done tremendous work in setting that up. And I also am the only legislative member on the Opioid Fund Advisory Committee. And that is the committee that is dealing with the money that we are getting from litigation against big pharma companies that manufactured opioids. And that money's coming into the Commonwealth and how we use that. I'm going to turn to Elena because this Committee on Bills and Third Reading, I'm going to sum it up for you in maybe 2 sentences, but Elena is going to take us through the process so you understand how complicated it is. The Committee on Bills and Third Reading is the gateway to the floor. There is no bill that can go to the floor of the House of Representatives except that it has the seal of House Counsel and the signature of the chair of the Committee of Bills and Third Reading. So, Eleanor, if you could take us through the process.
Once you're physically in possession of a bill, the committee is tasked with checking each bill for accuracy and intent. Each bill receives a thorough review by the committee. That means that we summarize every bill that comes to committee bipartisanly, as well as we carefully go into the background of each bill, how it got to us, and testimony that might have been given to prior committees. From there, we make sure that all the necessary documents are included with the bill. So home rule petitions or any vote or anything that might belong with the papers, we make sure that it's actually there. It's actually all intact. Then Chair Garlick works closely with her colleagues to make sure that everything that's passed through the committee actually has the purpose of the person that filed the bill and that it is accurately reflected. And then once Chair Garlick deems that a bill is ready to be released from our committee, we schedule it for session. On a session day, bill receives its final review from the committee's lawyers, and then it is stamped correctly drawn, and Chair Garlick signs each individual bill that's released to the floor. Any bill that's then ordered to us then goes through the same process all over again as it's ordered to us.
So I wanted this position very much, and I wanted this position because it allows me the opportunity to deal with other representatives, 159 other representatives on a daily basis on bills that are very, very important to them. And I also wanted this position because it is the catbird seat. You absolutely know what's happening in the State House when you sit in this position. I wanted to share with you, I am the first woman who has ever served as the chair of Bills and Third Reading. And with Eleanor and Isabel Lane, who's not here tonight, they are the first all-women staff who have ever served this committee. So. And Sophia has done tremendous work. I can't even begin to describe to you what it has taken for us to set up the Commission for Individuals with Disabilities, to set it up as a freestanding state agency, and the work it takes to corral 21 commissioners from across the Commonwealth. Sophia, can you please share with people the focuses we have for the Commission on the status of individuals with disabilities?
So the Disability Commission is made up of 3 subcommittees. There's the Legislative and Budget Subcommittee, which identifies and tracks legislative and budget priorities related to individuals with disabilities. We have the Workforce Support Subcommittee, which identifies objectives for the workforce crisis for those who provide services for individuals with disabilities. And then there's the Disability Employment Subcommittee, which identifies opportunities for employment for individuals with disabilities.
So in these positions, what matters is how I bring the heart of the district that I represent, Needham, Dover, and Medfield, to that work. This is one of the ways that I do this. Nothing as wonderful as Medfield Days, but all of the ways that I try to connect. And I want you to know that my personal motto, and I've got this good man, Russell Garlick, to back me up, is if you invite me, I will come. So things that are very important to you, please feel free to contact the office and say, can you attend this? Can we see you at this? All right. And this is a way that we deal with this. There's a variety of ways. It's not just when I arrive, but the emails we deal with, the calls we deal with, the incidental stops at Brothers Market when somebody has an issue that they want to talk to me about, and in all the other ways that you can think to connect, I want to connect. And what does that mean? What does that look for us? So this is a way that we're looking at all of the input that we get. And we'll see down the bottom, it said we received 300 calls just in 1 year alone, or contacts. So the person who is dealing with this in a masterful way is Maureen Callahan. So Maureen, can you talk to us about these 300 and talk about, is this just 300 people? Is this 300 calls? And how do we deal with that?
It's 300 individuals, and then the calls for assistance, asking for assistance, and then the number of calls are actually higher because we know it doesn't always take one call to resolve an issue or fix the problem for the constituent that's calling us. And so it's many more calls than that, but people have had a lot of needs throughout the pandemic in particular and still recovering from that. So the issues that are kind of in there in the slide are all the different things we hear about from people. And yeah, it's busy. We certainly get a fair share of calls.
And if I was Maureen, I would keep on my call log how many return calls that is. We can have an issue that is one return call. It is often 3, 5 return calls to settle an issue. It can be as many as 10. And we never finish a week that we haven't gotten back to somebody who has contacted our office with an issue. Even if we can say we're still struggling ourselves about this issue, we always get back. And this is the way, so how does that mean? How does that directly impact Medfield? And how are we supporting the community? One of the ways was we received $150,000 in the budget for wayfinding and signage in Medfield Center. Right, so I'm hoping you're all finding your way and you're safe in Medfield Center. Okay, and that was a direct request from the town that we asked for that money. The other ways we're looking at this, and we are very fortunate, Jean Minio is here tonight, and I've encouraged her to ask a question or make a statement at the end. But I want you to know that when we're looking at these grants, many of the grants are directly related to the work that the town and the volunteers and the staff are doing related to the Medfield State Hospital property. When we're looking at these cultural grants, when we're looking at the tourism grants, much of that money is a direct result of the work here. The way I'm helpful is I try very much to support it. When a grant is submitted, I contact the entity we're submitting it to as the state representative and say, I know this project, I know these people, I support this, we're asking for your support. And I did want to take a moment before we move on to congratulate Medfield. Medfield has a 90% of fully vaccinated individuals in this town. That didn't happen by chance. That happened by individuals who understood how important vaccines were, reaching out to their neighbors, supporting their neighbors. And I see Carol Reed is here. The Board of Health certainly was a leader in how we did that. And I would always tell you that the school nurses, not so much around residents getting the vaccines, but the work they did during the height of the pandemic was huge. And we recognize that. And you can still get free COVID tests, folks. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about fresh garlic. And I hope everybody here is signed up for fresh garlic. And if you're not, I hope you sign up for it tonight. But I'm going to ask Hannah, who is our lead on our team around social media. Hannah, can you talk to us a little bit about fresh garlic here?
Fresh Garlic is our weekly newsletter released every Tuesday. I use sources such as the Medfield Press, Medfield Insider, and the local patch pages to keep up with everything that's happening in Medfield. So every Fresh Garlic edition will have some information about Medfield, whether Medfield has received a grant or something's happening in the community. We love to hear more from the community, so if you have any events or information that you'd like to share with us, please contact our office or give us a call. We'd love to hear from you guys.
And it really helps us to do our work. And you can actually give us hard copy invitations, which I received tonight for the event on Saturday, March 11th, for music, cheese, and acrobatics. So send us your information. Let us know what's important to you. It's important to me if it's important to you. And one of the things I do want to tell you about Fresh Garlic is the personal statement is from me, right? Much to Hannah's consternation, because a lot of times I'm the bottleneck in the whole process, right? Because I'm thoughtful about that personal message. But we also give you information important in the Commonwealth and important in the neighboring towns, because I'm working very hard to make that network of Needham, Dover, and Medfield strong. And people like knowing what's going on in the other towns. So I want to talk to you about the budget. And my famous line on the budget is, a good idea without money is just a good idea. So let's talk budget here. I want to tell you one of the things, though, and when we get to the question and answer period, if we want to talk about the budget, one of the things that is a disconnect now for many Massachusetts residents, I think, is we hear the story that there's a lot of money in the state, right? There's the money from the federal government, and there's money for bonds, and then there's the increase in the fair share tax that we saw, and we're hearing that there's a lot of money. At the same time, we're hearing that the economy is unstable, and we don't know what the future looks like, if we're heading into a recession, if we're going to avoid a recession. So I think it's really hard for people like me and like all of you to get a handle on how much money do we have, how do we use it, how do we plan for the future. I will tell you without hesitation, the legislature will keep Massachusetts stable. We will. We'll see what that looks like. This is the money for the local aid and for the Chapter 70, and I see Jeff Marsden is here. So the local aid money is called the UGA money, and that just means unrestricted general funds, right? That means Medfield can use this money in any way that Medfield chooses, and you'll see there's been a slight increase in that money. The Chapter 70 money, you'll see that is a formula. We can't impact that. It's a formula that is in place, and what I do want you to know is that we are funding that formula, and I'll talk about that when we get to the special education circuit breaker. And this is the money that Medfield receives in Chapter 70. The special education circuit breaker in my district, in Needham, Dover, and Medfield, special education is a high cost. People know that Russell and I have a daughter who has special needs. And we were those very people who moved to a town we couldn't afford and had a living room that had no furniture because we needed those education services. That's true in the 3 towns that I represent, but it also makes planning very difficult for the town. And it's something that can cause tension, and something we would never want to do is cause tension between the parents of special education students and more typical students, right? So how do we meet all the best needs? The special education circuit breaker reimburses the town for special education needs. The problem is those needs can sometimes be unanticipated, and the reimbursement comes a year later. So when you hear that consternation, put it in terms of the budget figuring and not in terms of what children need and how we want to serve children. And that's important. I have done some work in the past that got put aside, but around there are some individual students who have very, very high needs, but it's a low incidence, really, a low incidence of very high costs. I believe the state should pick up that cost, and I will continue to work on that. And then around the other issues around infrastructure and bond package highlights, I want you to know everyone's talking about transportation, and that is very important. But in the infrastructure, and I don't mean to be using the word I, but I do want you to know what I did, right? And I want you to know under the infrastructure bond, I was able to get authorized for the town of Medfield $3.7 billion, million dollars. Yeah, that would be quite the event, right? And that's for Route 27 and West Street, which everybody is worried about. Everybody, people in Medfield, people outside of Medfield, everybody's worried about this. It's a two-step process, though. It's really good to get an authorization, but you don't have the money till you get the appropriation, right? But you can never get the appropriation if you don't have the authorization. We're at step one. We need to work with the new administration to be able to get that money to do that work. But I'm telling you, for Mass DOT, for everyone, they understand why we have such a great need there. So then I want to talk to you about the economic development bill. And I want to do this very quickly, but I think this is something that my constituents were likely very frustrated about. It's July 31st into August 1st. It's the last day of the formal session, and the economic development bill does not get passed. And it's all over the media that we didn't do the economic development bill, and who are these people, and what do you mean they're not going to meet in formal session again, and, you know, yada yada, right? So this is the issue. We're coming into the very end of the session, at which time the then Governor Baker activates this ruling called 62F that we haven't heard of since the 80s, was only activated once for a small amount of money. It is now, it's a formula when you have revenue in the state that exceeds the tax cost of the by law have to end on July 31st. That's not a whole bunch of people at the State House saying, all right, let's break, right? It is a law, right? Informal sessions by the Massachusetts Constitution have to continue every 72 hours, right? My staff, bills in third reading, every 72 hours in the State House working on bills. From the end of formal session to the end of the very session, right, which is right before new people get sworn in, we'll pass another 200 bills, right? But they're local bills. They're sick banks, they're alcohol licenses, they're issues that have no controversy. But we continue our work and we continue passing bills. So what we did with the economic development bill, we took out anything that was policy. We stripped policy out of it because any one representative can stop a bill. Any one representative when you're in formal sessions. So under policy, there's always going to be somebody, right? There'll always be somebody. We stripped that out, and then we passed all of the elements of the economic development bill that really made a difference to towns and municipalities and to those real budget issues. That actually happened, and I want you to know that actually happened. We didn't seem to get the coverage on that on the front page of the Globe. All right. And so what did that look like? That money was in these areas. What I'd like to just highlight for you is around the health and human services. You may know how hard I work on this. This was money that was directed to hospitals, to rest homes, to nursing homes, to rate increases for people that do health and human services work, and was vitally important to stabilize that sector, which short-term fix, very unstable sector right now. That workforce is in tatters, and the people who need and are depending on that are being, in my opinion, underserved. So then when I'm saying that I was working and that I want you to know that in the session of last year, 2022, the House of Representatives was working remotely. We were the first state in the country to go remote legally and with great integrity. I voted more than 158, I didn't vote more, 158 times in 2022. The House held 132 sessions. That was remote. We were in the State House by virtue of my position, but my colleagues were on the line and weighing in on issues, and they were there. And in that time, I sponsored 29 bills, and I work hard when I'm sponsoring a bill to make sure it has my best effort. So what does that look like for us? So my sponsored legislation, and Jeffrey Marsden is here to back me up, is the School Operational Efficiency Bill. This is the least interesting, most nuts and bolts bill you're ever going to hear about, but helpful. And it's about procurement issues, and it's about trying to meet the needs of educators are educating in new and different ways. We have to keep up with the ways they're trying to educate, the tools that they need, and we have to give them the flexibilities that they can move quickly on some of the resources that they need. And so that's primarily what this bill addresses. The reason this bill matters so much here in this room tonight is this bill was a brainstorm of me sitting with the superintendent and the chief financial officer in the town of Needham, just saying, what can I do? How can I be helpful, right? We began that work, and then as we talked about that, Jeffrey came to the meeting in Needham, Andrew Keogh, who was the superintendent in Dover, came, and they're my touchstones, right? I mean, what my superintendents think is important, I think is important. And we began that work. That was 3 sessions, Jeffrey, for us to get this done. And it got done in the end because the superintendents fought for it with great integrity and incredible professionalism, and not treated as well, I'll have to tell you, in the call. But they prevailed, and we were able to pass this bill, and we got it done. The other issues are things now, so I'm talking about how to bills that I'm going to refile, bills that I'm working on. I want to know, they say on average it takes 5 to 11 years to pass a bill. That actually is rooted in very good, reasonable ways, because we're passing laws to impact 7 million people. You better be darn sure what you're doing, and you've got to give it time to hear from other sides, to perfect the language, to move on. In each session, the language gets better, the coalition you're building gets larger, and you're able to bring a bill forward. I am working on a workplace violence bill that I want you to know what we're seeing in some of the what's happening in healthcare, which we know is also in tremendous turmoil, is related to many factors within the healthcare facilities. One of the major factors is workplace violence, and it's for a variety of reasons. And we need to deal with that. When you are a nurse like me, you're not supposed to wake up, shower in the morning, leave your family, and get beat up at work. You're not supposed to be the phlebotomist that somebody kicks across the room. You're not supposed to be the x-ray tech that somebody is spitting at and scratching, and that is happening. And we have to be able to protect those people. The second bill that I am refiling is around strengthening local public health. This is a bill that passed. I have been working on local public health since 2014 in a whole series of bills. But this bill was the ultimate bill, right? When we were really going to be able to implement all of the principles that we had been working on since 2014, in 2016 with a commission, in 2018 with the first bill. This was the final bill. This bill passed the House of Representatives unanimously. It passed the state Senate unanimously and was vetoed on July 31st by the governor. It is supported by the newly elected governor, and we are going right back as soon as we can. We need to know that public health across the Commonwealth is the same, whatever town you live in, and that the people who are delivering public health are qualified, are credentialed, are supported, and have the resources they need. That's what that bill is about. Medicare for All, I am just the godmother of the Medicare for All bill, and I do it because we have to have those hard discussions about where the money in healthcare is, right? And the way to do that is to support that bill and testify publicly on it and show up publicly around where the money is in healthcare. And finally, the Veteran Survivors Benefit is a bill born in my local VFW, and it's to increase the annuity that the spouses of disabled veterans have. This is a harder fight than it ever should be, and I'm in it till we're there. I am filing for the first time new bills on hybrid meetings, like tonight, and all the ways that we're doing this, on children's mental health. That really is a focus on social media and how the companies are actually dealing with our children, what the algorithms are that they're using, how we can intervene effectively, and how we can protect our children. extending outdoor dining, always fun, and extending public captioning. And this is actually from my work with individuals with disabilities. Anyone who is using captioning at home, just watching your own television, we used it all through COVID in a variety of ways, particularly on public meetings. This bill is just, let's keep this going, and in any public place where there is media, have captioning available. And a whole issue around what key legislation is coming up. This is key legislation, you know, and I'm hoping that people will ask me questions about this around the mental health bill, for which I served on the conference committee. Only 3 members from the House negotiate with 3 members from the Senate on the final language on that mental health bill. Around the clean energy, which is an important issue in our town of Needham. I heard from Fred Davis tonight, who couldn't be here, but we know how hard people in Needham have worked on this issue. On the Veterans and Soldiers Home, on the voting rights, on the work and family mobility, and on reproductive rights. I'm hoping that'll be part of our discussion tonight. The other bills I also worked on, nobody worked harder on the catalytic converter bill than Eleanor, but we can talk about that too. Okay. And then I want you to know as we're moving forward, and this is kind of redundant, we're hearing this in the news a lot. What we don't have is the details, right? So we all know the song, but we need to know the words. The issues are going to be on public health, on early education and child care, and human services workforce that I will be particularly focused on, and on these other areas, particularly I know very important to people here in Medfield around tax relief and how we're going to move on that. So those are the issues coming up. And I just wanted to express my gratitude. You know, it really is a tremendous opportunity to be your state representative. I said, somebody asked me one time if it was fun. And I was looking at it and I said, you know, my husband's a scientist. In all the years he's worked, nobody's ever said to him, so is it fun, Russ? Right? So I would not tell you this job is fun, but I would tell you it is fascinating. And there's so many opportunities and ways to serve. And having said this, I'm 2 minutes over and we should go to the question and answer period. And Andrew, may I ask you, should we pass around the mic for the questions? Okay. And remember, the kindest thing you can do for a speaker is to ask a question. Okay. Bill, you want? I just have to get you the mic, okay? So Bill's question is, will the presentation be available somewhere? So it is being, and my sincere thanks to Medfield Cable TV, and we know that Medfield Cable TV will show this several times, right? Colin, we're talking about Zoom and Facebook Live. Is that, can people review that? Okay, you want it on paper? So I can give you my slides. I probably can't give you the transcript because I ad-libbed, but if you'd like the slides, you're more than welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Jeff, thank you. Can you just pass that back?
I just want to thank you on behalf of all of our students for all the support you've always given us. And certainly you were supportive with the Dale Street project, and that was really important. We went to the MSBA, you were always there to support us, so thank you for that. One question I have for the FY24 budget, I know that the OSD has raised private special education tuitions by 14%. I know it's an issue you've heard about in your town, Needham. That's going to increase the budget by $900,000 next year. It's going to be probably $250,000 for us. That's really unanticipated. And OSD typically does an increase of 2% per year, but on the way out with the former governor, it was put at 14% for next year, which really is an undue burden on many, many districts. So I would just ask that, I know it's going to be an issue that is going to be up at the hill for a while. They're going to be talking about that. I would just ask you to support any pothole provision or anything to help districts out, because I know that's really something that's putting a real dent in our budget this year. Thanks.
Jeff, I want to do 2 things. Number one, I just want to set the table for people a little bit more around what OSD is and who's getting a 14% increase.
Okay, so OSD is the Operational Service Division, and one of their primary responsibilities is to set the tuition rate or increase for private special education schools. So typically it's 1%, 2%, sometimes 3%. But out of the blue this year, we got a memo saying there was going to be 14% increase. So to Medfield's budget alone, that is $250,000 for next year additional. Many districts, larger districts like Needham, 900,000, some are over $1 million. So we got to try to figure out how we can, fill that gap, make sure that we can pay those bills, but also not take away from everything else. So it's just it's an issue that I'm on the executive board for the Mass Association of School Superintendents, an issue that we've been dealing with and we're trying to advocate for as well. And I know Denise always supports us with schools, so I just want to bring it up as an issue to, hopefully you can support us as always.
So, to our superintendent's point too, especially, this came out of the blue, unexpected to hear about this 14% increase. So I've already contacted the chair of education so that I can better understand this, and I am attending the meeting March 3rd, Jeff, that the superintendents are holding, and I think there's work to be done there. But I also wanted to use this moment, Jeff, to thank you and the educators in the Medfield school system and all of the support staff. The tremendous work that has been done, the thought in educating our children, protecting our children, keeping our children safe. I think there has never been a more difficult time to be a parent, sending your child to school, hoping that they will be healthy, hoping that they will be safe, hoping that they will be able to progress in their education. But it's also true for every single teacher, every single support person in the system. And I don't think we're saying thank you enough.
Hey, Carol Reed. There you go. Good to see you. I can sit in my seat. I don't know if this is like town meeting. I'm Carol Reed. I've lived here for 31 years. It's just always a habit, right? 3 things. 1 point first. Thank you for what you have done for us with public health at the state level with shared services. Denise, when she mentioned public health, she went over that fast. Needham, Medfield, Dover, and now Sherburne will be and have, for funding from the state, benefiting by shared services. And Medfield and Dover, for example, don't have the public health capacity that Needham has. So the work that Denise has done over the years, she set up these pots of money that will benefit us by being in a region with Needham, Dover, and Sherburne will join. And I say that because we understand that our full-time employee headcount doesn't increase quickly here in Medfield with the challenges that we have in our budget. So these are services that will come to us, not to replace anyone who works in public health, but to supplement the services to Medfield. And you all know, with Denise's support, we hired a full-time public health nurse a year ago. That comes out of the operating budget. So thank you for that. Another question, and every year I come to this, and I've heard you mention frequently about water. We just had our Board of Health meeting and a presentation by Charles River Watershed and Neponset Valley. It was amazing, and I learned a lot. So I want to ask you about that because I've heard you talk about water. And I had one other thing, but I'm talking too long.
So the water issue is incredibly important, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I like that she said I set up pots of money. That sounds really good. But let's talk water, right? The water issue and the way that we have learned about water, and certainly Maureen has been involved in this, is particularly through the town of Dover. And the town of Dover is struggling around their water quality and their water quantity, both. And I always think to myself, between the Charles River watershed and the town of Dover is the town of Medfield, right? And what that impact is going to be, I really commend the town of Medfield. You know that I come to town meeting and the presentation we did on PFAS and how far ahead the town of Medfield and how visionary they were in that kind of work. But we're going to have to keep up that work. And I do have a bill that actually deals with relatively small water companies, but like we have in Dover, but around water quality and how we keep that data and who's keeping that data, because a lot of the smaller towns, that information is getting lost, and we can't afford that. We have to understand this issue. You know, I think at one point the country worried a lot about oil. I think the country's going to worry about water, our whole country. Any other thoughts? All right, you'll take one.
Been around for a long time. Thank God we've got somebody like Denise in here, because in the past, the state took away the state hospital. I mean, no more people needed cleaning. But it was crazier than ever. Now, people shooting each other, get shooting all that. They got to do something about health. Kids pick it up sooner. Even the hospitals are all being bought out by other hospitals, and they're being awful. So you're not really getting the health service you used to get. I mean, back in the 60s, I didn't want to go to those health plans. It gets a little bit less, drugstores are oh, and the other thing, I'd like to see some of what the governor was talking about, housing, got all this money he wants to give. I would hope he'd give some to Medfield so we could build some affordable housing. $700,000 houses aren't the affordable ones. They are if you can buy $1 million on the side. The average worker can't afford to live here. The average worker, you know. I saw a thing over in that the school that the strike they had. Those people they were striking for, they were only making $22,000 a year. That's not poverty. I mean, I think it'll get collected on
I'm going to take that, and with your permission, Paul, I'm going to split it up into three parts. Right? So the first one, let's talk about mental health, right? And you know, I served on the conference committee for the mental health bill. It was called the ABC for Mental Health. It's a bill actually about access. And what is true in this Commonwealth is that there are many barriers to people accessing the mental health they need, right? One of them is insurance, right? We had laws to make mental health on parity with physical health, but we never enforced it, right? And this bill actually deals with enforcement, making sure that that happens. That just like you get a physical every year, I hope, you should also have a mental health exam every single year. That's your right. You should be able to have it. We deal with the issues around insurance, and one of the big barriers you all know is prior authorization, right? You're in a lot of trouble, and then somebody says to you, well, we got to call the insurance company and see if they'll okay that medication. We'll see if they'll okay that procedure, right? The mental health bill deals with prior authorization. It also deals with the fact we don't have enough people in this Commonwealth who deliver mental health services, particularly psychiatrists and child psychiatrists who will accept insurance. We've got enough of the people who have these titles, but they don't accept insurance, and so many people can't access those services at all. And we begin to deal with that. We deal with the number of, in this bill, with the number of mental health beds we have. And you know, anyone who's heard me talk about these issues or talk about safe staffing, when you hear there's not enough beds, nobody is calling 1-800-JORDAN Furniture. That's, we don't have staff. We don't have staff in these facilities. And we need to pay that staff better. That actually touches a little bit when you were talking about the woven teachers, right? They were talking about the paraprofessionals. These are the teachers' aides. Oftentimes, it may be a one-on-one with a child that needs constant care. That's what the paraprofessionals, that's what teacher aides are doing. And we're paying them very, very poorly. And then I'll just go back to the final part around housing. I'm very interested in how we're going to deal with the issue of housing and what kind of support we're actually going to get. I'm hopeful that Medfield is essentially, we've got a lot of work to do, but we're pretty close to being shovel ready, don't you think, Bill? You know, I mean, we've got a plan, we have a developer, we should be ready to go. There's the Needham Housing Authority is essentially in the same place. We have a plan, we have a developer, we have resources for feasibility, we're ready to do that. I am hoping in our discussions about housing, I'm going to be able to make the case that when we're going to start, let's start with the people that are ready and let's get resources there. So I will make that case, Paul. I will. You know, yes. How are you? It's good to see you tonight.
Thank you. You did too. I saw the one outside your office, and then Hannah also put our band, the Remnants Medfield.com, I think I'm supposed to say there, on your website on Medfield Day, which is really fun. But I came tonight as the chair of the Medfield State Hospital Development Committee, and I just wanted to thank you for your support for that project and for meeting with us along with the developer in the fall to talk about, you know, next steps and what the project was really going to need. So as I recall, that was before the gubernatorial election. So my question would be, you know, what are your thoughts on the level of support in the State House with the new administration for housing and infrastructure? Would you say it would be similar, or do you think there will be increasing funding going to those types of needs?
So it's my belief it's going to be stronger. And I hope I'm proven correct, right? But the governor, Governor Healy, campaigned on the issue of housing. In her inaugural speech, she talks about the issue of housing. Her Lieutenant Governor, Kim Driscoll, this was her major issue, and as the mayor of Salem, that was her focus, right? What we need to understand, though, is what that actually means. You know, when Paul says, you know, $700,000 onto affordable housing, well, you know, $350,000 houses aren't affordable housing either when you're making $22,000 a year, right? So I'm going to be very interested on how we're going to move forward. And what I am hoping is that a project like the Medfield State Hospital, right, where we're really talking about different modes of housing, right? I don't think that's the right word, but different ways of housing people, when we're talking about building a community, is going to be seen as very valuable. I am hopeful for the Needham Housing Authority that we're going to be looking at public housing. Our former governor was very strong on housing, but he was very strong on housing through the eyes of developers who were building houses that many, many, many people could not afford. So I'm hoping we're going to be looking at real towns that are trying to get housing for people who can live there and want to live there. And to Paul's point, who work there, right? Let's get people closer to the work they have. And then maybe the transportation thing will be lightened up a little bit. Certainly, certainly. And we will continue to meet. Yes. Oh, we have a Zoom question.
So we can try. I think we're going to have a little bit too much feedback if we bring in this person to speak with the sound. So this question is coming from Mary Cusano, and she states, "Thank you for your service. Early in the presentation, investment dollars was discussed for the opioid crisis." And then this is in quotes. "On December 14th, 2022, the Department of Public Health in Massachusetts stated fentanyl continues to be the main driver of opioid-related overdose in Massachusetts. In the first 6 months of 2022, fentanyl was present in 94% of opioid-related deaths." End quote. Having said this, what do you and your colleagues at the State House discuss as it relates to the historical amounts of fentanyl crossing our very open southern border? What is being done about this? Thank you. And that was Mary Cusano.
Okay. So Mary, thank you very much for your question. Thank you for being on Zoom. That's kind of wonderful. So let's talk about this whole opioid issue a little bit. Right, so in 2018, I was the chair of the Joint Committee on Mental Health, Substance Use, and Recovery. I am the House author of the 2018 opioid bill. And at that time, we were beginning to address the issue of fentanyl. There is no one who's talking about opioids today that isn't also talking about fentanyl and what its impact is on people that have substance use disorders. When I talked about the mental health parity bill, a lot of that also deals with behavioral health. Behavioral health is actually individuals that have mental health issues and substance use disorders together, and how we address that. I do know that in many facilities in dealing with the fentanyl, we're using Narcan, we're distributing Narcan liberally. Anyone under the 2018 bill can actually get Narcan. You can go to a pharmacy, request Narcan, and receive Narcan. You no longer need a prescription to do that. I think it's important in the fight against fentanyl. Mary talked about fentanyl come across the southern border. Fentanyl's coming from everywhere, folks. It's not just coming from across the southern border. And I think, Russell, it's a synthetically derived, right? People are making fentanyl, right, all over the country. So we have to be very wise about how we're seeing fentanyl used, how we can combat fentanyl. And we have to continue to deal with the major issue, right, is, in my opinion, on so many issues, is let's get to the heart of this, right? Why do people have substance use disorders? How do we really meet them where they are? How do we help them to solve things? One of the things that I learned in particular is, if you want to help solve a substance use disorder problem for an individual, they need two things. Right up front, they need two things. They need housing, and they need a job. And once you can get them stabilized in those environments, then you can begin to help them deal with the many issues that might be part of their substance use disorder. I wish that I could tell you in 2018 we passed that bill and we've seen a tremendous success rate with it. We haven't. We can barely tread water with substance use disorders in this Commonwealth and in this country, but we have to stay with it all the time, and we will stay with it. We will. Thank you, Mary. Sure.
Opioid litigation remediation money we've all gotten and will continue to get for many years. So in my work, we're saying let's use some of that for prevention to be able to address the risk factors in the community. But there's a lot of money that our governor in her former role has helped us to understand.
So that is millions and millions of dollars. And we are projecting it's going to be over $100 million in a very short period of time. That is the advisory council that I sit on, that I am the only legislator who sits on. We are talking about prevention in the Opioid Advisory Council. We are talking about that. And in addition to that, we're talking about everyone brought something to the table, the number of commissioners. I think there's about 21 commissioners. And you're appointed by the governor or by the attorney general or by the treasurer, and we all come together, right? And one of the things that I did bring to this that was different than everything I was hearing at the table is an awareness of the substance use disorders in people with disabilities. And the rates are very high, particularly in people that have brain injuries. And they are a forgotten population, and now they are part of our agenda on how we're utilizing, or will be utilizing, that money. And we're using that money up front. There's one stop for mental health care, the behavioral health roadmap, right, that we are implementing in the state. It deals with how we bring people into the system quickly and then help move them through the system, provided that we have enough beds. Wonderful.
So this is from Kathy McDonald. Thank you for all your attention and support you give to Medfield. As Director of Medfield Outreach, we are seeing increased need for support for mental health. Limited resources, cost, more therapists only serving out-of-pocket customers are sending more and more residents to seek support from local resources. Thank you in advance for your ongoing attention to increasing and supporting funding to allow us to provide a safety net for an increasing number of residents in our communities.
So number one, I hope you all know Kathy McDonald and the work she's done, which is extraordinary work in the town of Medfield around mental health issues in support of the community. there are several pieces to this. A very targeted piece is one of the things that I was able to do was to get $90,000 for Beth Israel Deaconess Needham Hospital to hire a community outreach person who sits in the emergency room but who knows where the resources are and is particularly affiliated with Riverside Community Care, so that no matter how many programs we do on prevention, right, no matter how many times you try and tell people where their resources are, they don't look for them until they're in crisis. And when they're in crisis, they can't look for them because they're in crisis, right? So this person helps to get people to the supports that they need. The second thing is when I talk about strengthening the network of Needham, Dover, Medfield, and I'm willing to accept Sherburne, I am, right? But it's not only around public health, but it should be around mental health as well and where those resources are. We need to support our schools. When we hear our schools are asking for increase, you know, some people would call them guidance counselors, but these are people with strong mental health backgrounds. We need to understand what that need is, and we need to support the schools when they do that. We need to appreciate and support that in our police departments now, where we're seeing police officers are often the first responders to an individual that's in the middle of a mental health crisis. Well, there is nothing in their training that gives them the background to look at a mental health crisis and know how to diffuse that situation. And I just want to say one thing. So you might know that in my work in Needham, before I ever ran for state rep, I was the chair of our Board of Health. And I did a lot of work around suicide prevention because we had had 4 adolescents die of suicide in an 18-month period. The town was rocked to its very knees, right? But one of the things that I think that really came out of that coalition was our sense that we really need to be able to talk about these issues together. And we often talk about the mental health of our children right now because it's easier for us to feel like we are caretaking and our children are in trouble and we want to talk about their mental health. I would tell you the mental health issues we're seeing in our Commonwealth today go across every age, and we're not discussing that as clearly. We're not talking about what's really happening to older adults and the isolation that they have experienced and the fear that they certainly have. We're not talking about, you know, when we talk about substance use disorder, the highest rate of heroin use is in men aged 35 to 45. We need to talk about those folks and what's happening. So I honor and respect and know that it's important that we're talking about our children. But I believe it's through our children we're going to learn more about mental health and we're going to learn more about what we ourselves need. Any other thoughts? Yes. Ever since you got this plaque, you're very chatty. Yeah.
I'm in the construction part, everything like got this where they get put on the oxygen. The doctors take care of the pain because but what they do that's wrong. Instead of weeding them off, the doctors get in because it's people coming out, you gotta get rid of this. Now they get coke, heroin. I mean, I don't think people that do heroin die of they should weed them on instead of
So this is an important point, and I'm just, when you went to your doctor after that 24 hours, right, because you've shattered your shoulder or you've broken your femur, right, you could only get a prescription for 7 days. That seemed like the right thing, right, because we knew prescriptions were being written everywhere. But exactly what Paul said has happened. People who then can no longer get those opioids by prescription are going to the street because you can be addicted very, very quickly to opioids, and street drugs are cheaper, easier to get and cheaper. So Paul is right about how we have to look at people's pain management, and we need greater focus on pain management and alternative ways to deal with pain and how to support people with pain. But you're absolutely right on that, Paul. So Paul was saying, you're worried about your child. You think there's an issue. You go to the hospital, you're looking for help. And they're saying, well, this child, we can't prove that he's on drugs. We're not going to take him. This is Carol's point about prevention, right? We don't need people to be in so much crisis. They're showing up at the emergency room and saying, please, God, help me with my child. You know, I know something's wrong here, but I don't know what it is. We have to do a better job with prevention. We absolutely do. My problem is, for a person like me, advocating for something in the budget, you can't prove prevention. I can't prove how much money we're going to save with prevention. We can have models for it, but someone says, you tell me. So how can I say, listen, if we do this today, 5 years from now, 7 years from now, we're going to be in better shape, right? When somebody asks me for the data. Well, I think we really have to look to stories. We really have to look to ways we are seeing a difference. But prevention's hard to prove, but it's the most important thing we could do. Good. Any other thoughts? You are all great. I want to thank you so much for being here. Oh, we got another thought. Okay.
Heart-safe communities. Yeah. I think Needham is trying to be one. Medfield, really being responsive with CPR, and I know that you're an advocate for that. So that's something with AEDs we're working on in Medfield. And I don't know at the state level with all that's gone on if there's any info on.
So, you know, I'm trying to be careful not to say I too much. Nobody does anything by themselves. The House of Representatives, there's 160 representatives, there's 40 senators. We have all the layers of government that are in place. So no one does anything by themselves. But the issue of AEDs, very, very important in Medfield. It was Medfield's request. You know, I go to the town and I ask, you know, what would you need? What would be helpful to Medfield? Medfield's request to Representative Dooley was the money for the AEDs and, yep, the grant money. And I just asked Maureen to go back to that. And in fact, he worked for that money, and we did get that grant money for the town of Medfield. So it is very important to the town of Medfield. It was one of the town administrator's major priority requests. And he worked hard on it. He's the one who delivered on that. You're welcome. Okay. So good. So we all know it takes a lot of people. It takes a tremendous team. It takes a lot of people to make things work. My work is only as good as my relationship with all of you. I thank you for being here tonight. I thank Mary and everybody else who's on Zoom. I always thank Medfield Cable Television. I actually just met with their executive director this week at Breakfast at Fresco's, for anyone who ever wants to meet with me. And we talked about ways to continue good communication in the town of Medfield. So I thank you very much, Andrew, for your work and for Medfield Cables. So very much.